The latest Destiny 2 update, Ass and Irony, is looking to be the worst air quotes content expansion in the history of Bungie's 11-year franchise. It's following a downward trend after Edge of Fate was a $40 expansion that offered less total content than the $30 expansion Rise of Iron, even after Bungie said out loud the Edge of Fate and future paid expansions would be a little bigger than Rise of Iron.
First off, we're doing 2 expansions a year instead of just 1. And think of each of these expansions as a little bigger than something like a Rise of Iron from D1.
A little bigger than something like a Rise of Iron.
Following a more expensive yet less expansive DLC, Bungie then had a free update right behind it that, so far, should have paid people to play. If I was to describe Ass and Irony in one word, it would be shortcut. If that is officially one word. First off, Bungie created a half-assed reprisal of the Plaugelands, missing every detail that made it unique. Snowy weather, molten metal rivers, viral Siva infection, Bellwinter Peak, and the winter remake of the first location every Guardian knows. The winter version of the Cosmodrome is noticeably absent. As a matter of fact, the Cosmodrome regions you enter just a stone's throw away from the snow-covered Plaugelands are the exact same as the regions you find in Patrol. No snow, no dead Siva strands, no random chunks cut out of scrap metal. So Bungie restored the air quotes Plaugelands, but didn't include the parts of the Cosmodrome that also changed with the Plaugelands. Second, Bungie took the narrative shortcut for Ass and Irony and just claimed alternate timelines for how Red Legion appear under the Conductor's control. So Cade was revived by an Ahamkara's wish. Riven was revived because Techion's in Ahamkara paracausality transcending death. Taniks was mechanically resurrected through Atrax and Clovis Braytech, and dozens of notable Destiny villains were resurrected as Nezarec trauma ghosts. But Bungie pulled the alternate timeline card to revive a basic faction we have fought hundreds of times that have already been fleshed out as much as possible. Like if we were fighting the Shadow Legion, we could have learned of how Urix is managing the Legion after Callus and the Witness were taken off the board. But instead it's the Red Legion, the faction that hasn't been developed since Season 13 when the Red Legion's remnants were trying to join Kaido's Imperial Cabal army and Urix's initial defection to the Shadow Legion during the Vox Obscura exotic mission. Third, it's fairly obvious Bungie used the Red Legion because it's the easiest faction to implement. On top of the already very present Coral Vex and the fact that Bungie's been avoiding a Siva Fallen restoration as much as possible, in terms of the work for designing the other main faction of this season, they just had to add some shiny prism collars onto the models of every Cabal within the Red Legion, and done. Shortcut with the narrative alternate timeline and shortcut with the minimal work to update the Red Legion for the Conductor's forces. Fairly certain all the time and budget saved with the shortcut faction implementation made it possible to fill the Eververse with the many armor sets and various cosmetics we get this season. After the 3 episodes introduced Coral Vex and Compelled Shadow Legion, Revenant Scorn, and the complete rework of Dire Taken changing the entirety of Taken both visually and mechanically, slightly visually adjusting Red Legion is a massive downgrade of effort. Then the fourth reason. The main seasonal activity of Ass and Irony is Reclaim. What was initially thought to be another attempt at another roguelike after solving some of the issues of the first iteration, turns out that Reclaim only had 2 things in common with the Nether: activity-based selectable perks that are much less compared to the Nether's version of perks, and a Destiny 1 patrol location changed to temporary seasonal content bound for sunsetting. Instead of the roguelike mode with reworked mechanics, scavenging for limited resources, and unique build crafting in addition to your loadout, we get a worse version of Overthrow. That activity from the Pale Heart Guardians had grinded so hard it would be just as smooth as Justin Truman's forehead. Just to be clear on the amount of overthrows people had to run, the activity was a source of Pale Heart Deepsight weapons, multiple parts of the exotic Kavastal quest, various damage types and perk rolls of the exotic Ergo Sum, and the dozens of possible rolls of the prismatic class items, considering most people just opened overthrow chests instead of running dual destiny. Not to mention we were missing attunement for these rolls for quite some time, so repeat rolls were quite often, and you had 3 characters to grind for. And you probably had to run more for the Transcendent title in the end of the day. So the location is a half-assed reprisal, narrative shortcut with the development shortcut returning the Red Legion, and the main activity, the foundation of a season's gameplay loop, is nothing to write home about. It's pretty boring to run through a less rewarding version of an activity, not to mention how rushed in development it feels. The transitions between zones being a fade-out fast travel with invisible border walls preventing travel between the other zones feels like they had no other options for smooth travel. Meanwhile, though, we have access to our sparrows. Makes it feel like we were going to roam between the regions ourselves, but Bungie didn't trust us to follow the mission markers, so they removed our roaming permissions without removing our sparrow access. The lack of rewards doesn't help either. Flashback to Season of Defiance, aside from the power grind at the time, there was still deep sight weapons to hunt for with the new class swords, Imperial Decree shotgun, and the array of awoken weapons connected to the season within the Defiant Battlegrounds playlist. With the tier system, if you're grinding out power level, most weapons are meaningless, especially if it's not something high in the tier rating. So in terms of the grinding, most people are likely to stick with solo ops instead of relame. And as a side note during the edit, because this development came out after I recorded the main bit, Rick Cacus and Glad are officially saying they just were not participating in the Desert Perpetual, which is kind of wild considering how everyone knows that a raid race is a big day for creator, not only for the sake of their channel, but monetization in general. It usually brings in a lot of money. But at the same time, they just can't bring themselves to play, be it the state of the game, them not wanting to do it, them being tired of Destiny as a whole, whatever their exact reasons were. As a whole, they just didn't feel the fire they did about Destiny, which makes me wonder why Bungie is so determined to make this epic raid race so big, considering in the past, with hindsight, every other raid that I can think of when it got a hard mode, there was not nearly this much fanfare. It released, you got access to new loot maybe, catalysts or whatnot, but in the end, you just kind of did it, and for creators, it was an opportunity to make new guides because of new mechanics and such. But in terms of Bungie, they are throwing an entirely new raid race, a whole new belt, a whole coverage by CB Gray and Evan F, to make me wonder why are they taking this epic version so seriously when literally no other raid got this amount of coverage, to the point that it's, why did this get so much coverage, but the rest of the season got such lackluster effort? Hindsight, of course, Bungie has never not taken shortcuts. It's just a lot more prevalent when the main parts of a season show it. If you go looking, you can find several instances of shortcuts that might be excused as re-assets. Off the top of my head, I think of the main weapon sets from Season of the Deep, featuring most, but not all, of the reprised weapons from Gambit Prime and the Reckoning, as well as the Taken versions of each weapon. Fairly certain when developing the Taken versions, Bungie copied the originals before messing with stats and perks. Evidence being that the weapon ornaments for the original weapons also applied to the Taken versions. Considering that the ornaments are only described as applying to the originals, seems like a Todd Howard level of feature that they just never corrected. In the end, you can see the animations Bungie has been reusing for years, same base models of weapons across multiple different weapon iterations, ornament concepts being reused multiple different seasons. Like I said, if you go looking, you can find it, but I'm gonna stop for the sake of keeping this video a little shorter. For Destiny's continued existence, I would sure hope someone at Bungie or Sony can take this to heart and understand that the Destiny that once drew people in is dead, and what's left is a shambling corpse of a franchise I once held above every other. Hopefully someone can stop this Hindenburg before it crashes and burns. On that note, if you enjoyed this video and share my sentiment of loving Destiny but hating what it's become, a like and subscribe goes a long way to helping me bring common sense back to Destiny. Comments are always open for civil discussion, as always, but with that, my name is the Mad Scorpion, and I will see you in the next video.